Hey guys, what's up? So, in this video I figured we would do something that I don't see people talk about most of the time. Usually hobby channels tend to bring up tools, but I figured we would talk about unconventional tools. And of course every hobbyist has unconventional tools on their workbench. We all do. We all find that one or two things that we use all the time that really does come in handy. And of course they're unconventional. They're not designed for hobbying of any kind, but we do find a use for them. So in this video, I'd like to break down the things I use every day when I'm doing my hobby to make my life a whole lot easier and make my hobby a whole lot easier. So first off, starting off, this is probably a no-brainer, but a calligraphy pen. Now, I apply all my panel liner using a calligraphy pen. This stuff is no joke. It is not some urban legend. This does work extremely well for panel lining. This stuff is probably the best option I've got to panel line anything in my hobby. It's great. Like, you can get these right in the panel lines of something. They're going to go in perfectly straight and they'll do great. There's a little bit of control, obviously, to learn with them since, unlike a brush or a marker, you're going to literally be using this like you would a calligraphy pen. So there is that. But it's super useful. And you get not only the really nice wooden handle for like $8, you also get a variety of different tips as well. This being one of the more regular tips I use alongside this. I was practicing some sketching with it and wanted to see how I do, drawing with a calligraphy pen, and it's not bad actually. But then you get, a bunch of other tips as well that, put it this way, I went to my local hobby shop, actually my local craft store. I think I got this at a Michael's for like $8.99, and I got this nice wooden handle, variety of tips, easy to remove and easy to change, unlike the US Star panel lining pen. But that is right here, and essentially the concept is the exact same. It's a stick with a calligraphy pen tip in the middle of it, and you do it the same way. And I'm going to be honest with you, I like using the calligraphy pen better. One, because these tips are kind of hard to change, because I don't know who makes replacement tips for these, and I don't think those will fit in here. On top of, this is nice, but it being made of metal means it's kind of hard to clean. This isn't. It's wood and rubber. If the tip gets dirty, I take some enamel thinner, rub it in there with a Q-tip, it's perfect. Now, another very unconventional thing that, comes off kind of hoarder-ish for several reasons is simple. This is a vitamin organizer, or a pill caddy. What this essentially does, you put all your medications in it, it does all that, but what I use it for is offcuts of miniatures. And I've got them labeled on top. Arms here, heads and helmets, weapons, diorama pieces and unfinished models, shoulder pads, other weapons, more weapons. Really useful thing to have. Because, you can put all your offcuts of your minis or things you're working on where you have a bunch of small parts and you don't want them lost in there for your fodder box for other custom projects. Another good thing to do if you do a lot of dioramas and scenery, which I usually do for competition pieces, keep like a little box like this. This is a sewing kit box. I don't know how to sew, but I have one of these boxes. My uncle gifted me these because, he's also a fellow hobbyist, and this is super useful. These are all old parts of car models. Like, these are tail lights. This is like a little carpentry shear of some sort. These are car model parts that I don't know what they're for. They're for like a roll cage or something. A bunch of springs, little pistons, little, tons of little tiny fiddly parts that you're gonna be surprised. Maybe you find little small parts, like it's like little springs, little capacitors, little nuts, little bolts, little tanks, hoses, things like that. These come in handy to make super useful diorama parts. As a matter of fact, they come in handy for a variety of different things. Even add greebling to models and add detail. These are super useful to have. I always keep this at arm's length. That and my other fodder box. Now, another thing that's unconventional, but I keep it. Mostly because it's good for cleaning my airbrush. These are picks that are made for apparently cake decorating. I found these in a cake decorating aisle at a hobby store. Well, craft store, let me specify that. And these are super nice tips. I don't really use the curved one much, but what these are designed for is for cake decorating to get. But these have super nice long tips on them that are good for getting in all the little nooks and crannies of your airbrush. And that's all I will use this for, is just cleaning my airbrush. Especially this one. Super good for getting down there in your color cup around your needle, scraping out paint or residue that's in there. They stay sharp surprisingly well too. Nice comfort grip on them. This little straight pick's nice too for that same type of thing, especially for cleaning out tips and things. Really useful investment for like $5. These come in really handy. Another thing that surprisingly has come in clutch for me more times than not has been a multi-tool. And this is probably one of the best inventions made, one of the best things you can use as a hobbyist. You get needle nose pliers, which I've used several times, as you can tell from how beat up they are, and a variety of other different tools. And there are times when I won't have a tool on my rack, which is strange because I keep a lot of hobby tools, but sometimes I won't have a tool because I just don't have it, or I've never been interested in getting one. They come in handy, like these thick, heavy files. I've used these for sharpening things in a pinch. A flathead screwdriver used for prying up things. I've used this for loosening computer parts or old tech parts, in a hurry. Of course, this is for when you're enjoying a nice beverage while you're painting, or in this case, when you need a little small knife to cut something with, like open a package with. Then same on this side. A good knife for opening a box with. Another small knife that's also good for opening boxes with. And then of course the one that's always hard to get out because they're always embedded in there so much. And then of course another flathead screwdriver and a pry bar. And then of course the other one is another type of can opener, but that one doesn't seem to want to agree. And of course this is a cheap one that I got from Harbor Freight like almost a decade ago, and this has come in so handy. This is probably one of the tools I've used the most for holding airbrush fittings or, taking something apart, or, usually it comes in handy in my other hobby, which isn't just this, but also old electronics. This comes in handy doing that as well. And of course, when you're doing electronic work for Plamo and you need to strip wires and things, these do come in handy. Super useful. And of course, they fold up conveniently. Store back on your desk. Really nice investment. Now, a beater's tool, those who do beading and things like that, super useful. You'll get like little small round-nosed pliers like this, and these are super useful. Again, for little small intricate hobby work, really quite useful. And these also were gifted to me by my uncle, who is also a hobbyist. The man just, he knows what he's doing as a hobbyist. It's quite nice. Same rule applies with these, little small, smooth, no teeth pliers. Good to hold something in place as you're gluing it, or as you're trying to apply decals or something. That comes in super handy. A small pair of wire strippers and nippers. Again, good for doing electrical work. Good for wiring up small model kits, wiring up LED kits, wiring up, LED modules, you know, clipping wire to do pinning on models, doing all kinds of intricate small clip work. Little small pair of needle nose pliers. You know, these are, again, super useful for a variety of different things you'll need pliers for. I've used these before to clamp together model kit parts when I've been doing a restoration of old models, or, you know, come in handy when I'm trying to pry something up or trying to hold something in place. Super useful. Then the one that's probably the most useful to me are these plastic tipped pliers. These are so useful. Not only are these useful for airbrush assembly and disassembly, these are useful for modeling in general, because you can get these open pretty wide, get them around like plomo pieces that are being really cumbersome, and then crimp them in place and put enough pressure on them where they're not going to mar because of the nice soft plastic here, and still get what you need for the strength behind them. They're super useful. I have used these far more than I ever thought I would. Now, we're going to get into some of the more oddball categories. A sprue organizer. Now, this is not a sprue organizer. You can buy sprue organizers. I think they're pretty overpriced for what they are. You can either make one out of a cardboard box, or you can do this method. This may look like a family of ghosts. It's not. It is a letter organizer that I got from a thrift store years ago. I've used this thing daily for eons. And let me show you why this comes in handy. Say you're working on a kit like a high grade, and you've got like 4 sprues you need to organize. Have out in front of you at all times to get everything ready to go. You can just slide them in here. It'll hold your sprues in place. Then as you need them, you can just grab your sprue, cut your piece, put your sprue back on here. They're organized, they're out of the way, they're clean. You don't have to worry about them littering your desk, which if you're doing this regularly, you probably don't have a lot of desk space anyway. Now, something I'm sure you see a lot of hobby channels have are like random cups and jars and boxes and things sitting on their desk, which we do. I have an Orville Redenbacher popcorn container labeled Stabracadabras. What these are my used X-Acto knife blades. That's all that's in here. Is used X-Acto knife blades and busted files and things like that. Anything sharp goes in here. And then the lid goes on this, and this gets taken to a recycled place, so that way no one's getting hurt. Because I would feel horrible if an animal or human got hurt from my carelessness. That's why it's always good to keep things like that in a separate container, cap them off. Comes in super handy. Keeps things out of the way, prevents you and anybody else from getting hurt. That's a good way to really practice safety in your hobby. Now, this is another unconventional thing that I found, believe it or not, of all places, at Walmart. This is a silicone tray that is inserted into a plastic holder, like so. And what this is for makeup brushes. We're doing cosmetics with. But what I like to use it for is when I'm cleaning my brushes. What it's super useful for is, as you're cleaning your brushes, you stick them in these little notches, and it holds them in place. So this way you can just keep going. Leave these upright to dry. Keeps the tips in the air. They look great. And then some of your more oddball brushes, like these triangle tip ones, you can just slide in here, and it works perfect. I've used this thing every time I clean brushes, which is pretty periodic for the most part. At least it should be in good practice. And if you guys want to see a video where I explain how to clean brushes, let me know. I'll gladly make one. but super useful. Because this itself being silicone, it doesn't really get mold easy, so that's really useful. Use that thing a lot, about 3 times a day. About 3 times a week. Comes in super handy. And then of course your odds and ends, like these little cheap plastic drink cups. This is something I got from a drink cup. This is something I got from a client at my day job. As kind of a, hey, you know, thanks for helping us out. This is a cheap, little thin plastic cup. I won't use it for beverages because I've usually got coffee cups or bottled beverages down here. But it does come in handy for storage use. And that's what I use it for. To store folders, and to store files and reamers and things like that that traditionally, you know, would be kind of annoying to store. And then it comes in handy for it. And of course, dowel rods. Yes, dowel rods. This is a, I believe, 2-inch in diameter dowel rod. This was left over from a construction project I was doing around the house. I believe my dad was using it to make the rod in the closet. Don't know. I found it out in my shed. There was about 5 feet of this. Super useful. I cut it at several 4-inch increments so that way it fits in the hand perfectly. And it's one of the best plinths you can use. Of course, I've sanded all this, obviously, to, you know, bring the splintering down. Same on the bottom here. I took it to a belt sander and got it all nice and smooth. Put some double-sided tape up here. But this is one of the best plinths you can use. You can get your hand around it super tight. It doesn't do fatigue. It's comfortable in the hands. Now, of course, the other option for this, obviously, is the Citadel version, but these are like $20 a piece. Well, you do have a lot of options to hold these in place, and, you know, this can come off, and for some odd reason, this is on a tripod mount. I don't know why, but, you know, super useful. Good to have, but kind of limited on what you can do with it because it's limited by, obviously, base size. You're not limited on base size with these. As a matter of fact, any base can be used on these. You know why? Double-sided tape. When it's time to change it and you want to switch base sizes, you peel this off. You put on new double-sided tape. Problem solved. I buy double-sided tape by the roll, cut off as needed, stick it on here, done. That's lasted me for years. I also have other unconventional methods for plinths as well. I keep medication bottles for the same reason. I can get a really nice firm grip on these. I can put a piece of double-sided tape on here, spray it, done. And I've got about 5 of these now. You know, they're super useful to have. Another very useful, unconventional thing to have as a hobbyist. Tupperware. Yeah, I know it sounds weird to say, but Tupperware. For your scale modeling and your scale terrain. This is Betty Crocker Tupperware. This is like what little frosting things came in. I don't even know where this came from. This has just been in my house for years. Puts an airtight seal on stuff. This is, of course, basing material for miniatures and HO scale stuff. But just, you can pop this on there. Goes in storage. It's perfectly fine. You know, another example is right here. Another little storage container I found. It's got little leaves in here. A little fall leaf terrain in there. Super useful. Again, airtight seal. This ain't going anywhere, and it comes in extremely handy. Tupperware is a useful thing to have. Another useful thing to have. Ignore the color on this, obviously. Hair dryers. This is again is a old hair dryer that my uncle gave me, and being another hobbyist. You know, ignore the 90210 endorsement. but the rad colors are nice though. You know, selectable voltage, 125 or 250 volt. Plugs in, turn it on. Comes in super handy for doing like drying paint faster, trying to get plastic cold enough to pry something out. Now, that's mostly what I use it for, is if I'm trying to get plastic heated to pry something off or to swap something over or take something off. This is what I'll use. Now, another useful thing to have as a hobbyist, especially if you do a lot of miniature and model work, a Micron Sakura .003 pin. I buy these in bulk. Little small nib. Perfect for doing eyes on pretty much any scale of figure. It's perfect. Really adds a sense of realism to them. Of course, you know, unless they're a large scale, you know, like 1/30th scale or, you know, 1/50th scale, then you won't need that. But things like, you know, 1/35th scale, 1/18th scale, 1/20th scale, that is obviously going to come in handy for doing pupils. Now, another unconventional thing. This is something that I 3D printed. This is a various use hose hook. I use this to hang from the side of my desk, and I wrap my airbrush hose around this. So this way it stays off the floor and organized. Super easy. Took maybe a day to 3D print. That's not the smoothest 3D printing job, but it doesn't need to be. It's just a hook to hold a hose with. So, it comes in extremely handy. Now, something else where you're thinking, oh, well, you know, I'm new to the hobby. I don't do a lot of hardware work. Why would I need to get hardware tools? Well, when you start working on things like perfect grade Gundams or some old master grades, you will need to work with screws and precision screwdrivers. Get a kit like this. This was also a gift from a family member. This is like, I think 40 pieces. It's a cheapy, I think like Harbor Freight brand. This thing has come in so handy. It is so useful. You know, the little, make sure that when you get one, it's got a screwdriver that's actually decent. Because this one, the back end pivots, and the little collar here pivots too. So as you're screwing, you have 2 pivot points. So that way nothing causes hand fatigue. It has an extension too. It's super nice. Really good kit. I've used this thing numerous times. Very useful to have. I have a couple different versions of these. I have one of these that's got more odd bits than this. And then of course, obviously, a pair of, these are considered surgical shears. You can get these for like first aid kits and things. I bought these a long time ago. Actually, I don't think I did. I think these were given to me from a family member. Super useful. I keep these super sharp. I keep them on a whetstone sharpener. I keep by my desk for my tools. These things have lasted me for years. These are my decal shears. These things are super useful. Razor sharp, extremely durable, super useful. You can get a pair of these for like $5 somewhere. Most hobby stores will carry these in some variation. Now, another one that may seem unconventional, again, because of the hobby you do, but it's really not, is sticky tack. Sticky tack, well, is silly putty. Now, silly putty, other than being something you use for transferring like comic strip stuff, is perfect for masking. Like it's the best for doing airbrush masking. You can just take it out, it's malleable, comes in a variety of colors, which doesn't matter, obviously. But you can take it, you can put it on areas, you can mask off. around like curves, around curved areas, easier than you could masking tape. It's going to offer the same level of masking ability. And the best thing about it, stuff's super cheap. You can get this stuff for next to nothing. It's going to come in extremely handy. I use this stuff almost every time I do a big airbrush project. Comes in so handy. And of course, what that's an alternative for, obviously, is your more premium, like, airbrush putties. Elastic putty. This is just silly putties, all this is. I know it says camouflage putty. What it is it's made for doing, like, camouflage work on your models. Because usually what you want to do is silly putty on that. Oh, this can. This is not a good idea to keep in, like, an aluminum can. I don't know why AK does this. It's black. And it looks like a hockey puck. Or some kind of slimy object you wouldn't really want near you. And I mean, it's all right. I don't think this stuff works as well as silly putty, in all honesty. Silly putty's a little more malleable. This stuff's more slimy. But it's also because this stuff is designed for one purpose mostly, and that's camouflage. Yeah, it's reusable, obviously. It doesn't leave a residue, neither does silly putty. Won't remove paint, obviously, neither will silly putty. So, really don't see the point in paying $10 a can for that when you can pay $1 a egg, I guess, for silly putty. Now, of course, another thing that a lot of us hobbyists keep, which may seem strange, it's going back to the Tupperware. This is a Pyrex container. This is a tempered glass container. I have like 10 of these sitting all around my workspace. And I use them for stuff like this, to keep things organized. Keeps things out of the way. They're durable. They're thick glass. They're durable. They make it so much easier to be able to just get things out of the way. Put them somewhere you know they're going to last forever. Offer a lot of storage options. They're great. Now, of course, you know, your mileage may vary. As a hobbyist, of course, there are things you will find that better suit your hobbies than someone else's. You know, what I'm saying is not the gospel. You know, this is just my unconventional tools I use for hobbying. That doesn't mean it's going to be your exact use either. You might find something that works better for you specifically, which, you know, every hobbyist is different. Your mileage may vary. I know that when I got started in the hobby, I wanted to use a lot of traditional tools I'd see in like magazines and things, and whatever the guy at Hobbytown could talk me into buying, and then I realized I really didn't need all that to make my hobby work. When I could just buy what I knew was going to work, save myself some money, or use what I already had at the house to also save myself some money, and would work better. The final thing I want to show is something that has to do with hobby organization more than it does actually a tool, but it is a tool. These are a 3-tiered spice rack. You can get these at any big box supermarket. It's like your Costco's, your Walmart's, your Target's, all that. And these are super useful. My entire paint rack is comprised of like 5 of these. They come in so handy. You can just, you know, double stack stuff on them. They've got these little rubber grips on them. Perfect. You can lay things out side by side. Put things like thinners on there. Paints, glues, adhesives, inks, all that. And they'll be organized. Usually organized with some bit of something to them. But extremely useful to have. Probably one of the best things to have to organize your paints and your adhesives and pretty much anything else with. Some of the easiest stuff to get a hold of and use. It's perfect. Now, as I said a little bit earlier, your mileage will probably vary. Every hobbyist is a little bit different. Every hobbyist is a little bit different. We all go through different journeys as a hobbyist. We all go through different interests as hobbies. You know, some of us may like doing gunpla. Some of us may find more interest in older Plomo kits from the 90s. Some of us may find more interest in things like, you know, car models, automotive, planes, military, HO scale railroading, anything. Miniatures for tabletop gaming. All hobbies are good hobbies. It's good to get your mind off the where the world is and get into some relaxation and, you know, the therapeutic benefits hobbies offer. It's just such a good, relaxing thing to have. And hopefully I was able to at least help you guys be able to make decisions based on what you want to get for your unconventional hobby tools. You know, hopefully this helps you guys know that when you spend your hobby dollars out there is a way to do it on the cheaps, but still get good quality tools that'll work well, but you don't have to break the bank on. Your best friends obviously are going to be your local hobby store. Always support your local hobby store. No matter how good or bad they are, support them, because they're being slowly diminished by places like Hobby Lobby and Michael's. Sad, but that's just how these things work. Only use Amazon really if needed. Go to your local craft stores, or if you don't have an option, Michael's or Hobby Lobby. You know, whatever. Not the best option, not really a hobby store, but they do work. So, in a pinch, they will get you what you need. There are a few things here that I had to go to Hobby Lobby to get because my local hobby shop closed their doors in like 2018. So they've been the only option I've had for years. It's sad, but it's what I got to do to get an in-person hobby shop. Supermarkets are your best friend in some of their weird odds and ends organization spots. Dollar Trees, Harbor Freights, or any discount hardware store you have are going to be super useful resources for you. As a matter of fact, the main gloves that I use on my channel, these are Harbor Freight gloves. These were like $14. These are nice gloves. They work. They get the job done. I like them. You know, they're thick enough to get what they need to be. You know, I'm not going to complain with them. A lot of the tools here were Harbor Freight tools. For hobby tools, Harbor Freight's a really good idea. So, remember, you have options. Obviously, online retailers are perfect. Always support places like New Type and USA Gundam Store. They're going to be good options for all your hobby tools and essentials moving forward. Good options for paints. If that's the only option you have in the country you live in, or the only option you have because you don't have any hobby shops, it's perfect. They are a good option. They usually have things in stock, especially New Type. Usually things are in stock. They ship at a reasonable speed. You can get your projects done pretty quick, pretty easy. I'm not sponsored by New Type, but I will always give New Type my business. And if I had to pick one online retailer, it would probably be New Type. They would be the one I would go to for most of your hobby goods. Evans Designs for your LEDs. Things like that. You know, Amazon's okay, but Amazon's not your go-to. eBay sometimes can be your best friend when it comes to this kind of stuff. Again, you have to pick and choose with eBay because sometimes you'll get some scalpers and just that whole fiasco. I'll explain that later. But hopefully I was able to help you guys out. If I did, or if there's anything you guys want me to cover, like cleaning your brushes or talking about how you organize your paint racks or any other tool or tutorial videos you guys want to see, put them in the comments. Let me know. Thanks. I'll see you guys in the next one.